for the cameras. Gavel us in. It's 11:03. Welcome. This is Town of Southborough, Massachusetts virtual meeting of the Personnel Board for Wednesday, May 12th, 2021 at 11 a.m. We had a little Zoom glitch there, so we got started a few minutes late. Thank you, Ms. Hale, for taking care of us, and we are being recorded. I will read the required statement since our clerk, Ms. Jasinski, is not here. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Personnel Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information, the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with the right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website, www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public wish to participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately address the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Thank you all. And I note for the record that all members of the board are present with the exception of Ms. Jasinski, who is absent this morning. We are also joined by our Personnel Director, Mr. Purple, our Finance Director, Mr. Ballantyne, and our Zoom host and Assistant Town Administrator, Vanessa Hill. All right. First order of business on our agenda, number 2, administrative business. You have in your packets at pages 1 to 4 minutes of the meeting of April 14th, 2021. Those minutes having been circulated to the board in advance of the meeting, reading of the minutes of April 14th is waived. Do I have any comments, additions, deletions from the board on the minutes of April 14th? I see no heads. There being no comment on the minutes. The minutes are approved by the chair as presented in the packet. Thank you. You have at page 5 an expenditure ledger. This is the most recent ledger from the town accountant's office. Any comments or questions on the ledger? And these numbers will be available to you a little later in the meeting when we have a discussion about funding some employee development training. All right, we are on to 3A, reports. The first report is mine. I will draw the board's attention to pages 6 to 11 in the packet. So, number 1, I sent out the guidelines document that is at page 6. This was approved by the board. This is the guidelines for this year's performance evaluations. There was a cover email that I put on it. I did not include that in the packet as I copied the board on that at the time.
Right.
So, any questions? We didn't actually discuss the guidance document as printed. We discussed how we would do it, and I put it together and I sent it out because time was of the essence. If anybody has any comments, we can discuss them now or hold it to the end. Anybody have anything? All right, I'll keep going then. So in response to this document that went out on April 21st, I've received a couple of questions. The first question was from the chair of a board about how to prepare and conduct the evaluation of personnel in the age of Zoom. And I spoke with this person. This is a topic that's been of interest to me since long before we were on Zoom, because the rules of the game don't really change because we're on Zoom. A public meeting's a public meeting. It's just that boards and committees are experiencing now that they have an audience via Zoom, whereas they might not have had an audience before. So the boards are sensitive to what they can discuss in public about performance and what they cannot. So I spoke with Vanessa. This is an area we've discussed before as a board. I think Mr. Dietz was here in 2018. I don't know about Mr. Nixon or Mr. Rubenstein. When Town Labor Council, Mr. Norris, came to discuss the law in this area. There was a Supreme Judicial Court decision, Belter versus Whalen, that changed the guidance in this area. And we heard from Mr. Norris about this. Goes back 3 years now. My, how time flies, Vanessa, doesn't it? It feels like just yesterday we were talking to Tim Norris about Belter versus Wayland. So I conferred with Vanessa, Ms. Hale, and we both agreed time was ripe in light of these questions. Maybe send out a reminder to our boards and committees. And it doesn't affect individual supervisors. If an individual supervisor is doing a performance evaluation, that is considered confidential because it's individual to an individual. However, the rules are different when we're talking about a board, such as the library trustees or any of our boards and committees that review folks. If they talk about performance, that's not grounds to go into executive session. So I came up with a little memo rather than just send out the legal opinion again. And legal opinion is in the packet, starting in page 7. I drafted a little guidance document, and that is the document that was a supplement to your packet. So that I sent out on Monday. So it'll be the last 2 pages of the packet. And I just wanted to get the board's approval to send that out in the name of the board. So that's the memo that says to department heads and chairs of public bodies, performance evaluations, gives a couple highlights from Belter and attaches some guidance on the 2nd page from the Attorney General's office. So anybody have any comments or questions about that document? And a show of hands, I'll send that out after the meeting to our reviewers, just so everybody is reminded. And also love to hear from Mr. Purple or Ms. Hale if they have any. I don't know if you folks have received any questions in this area.
I have not received any questions. I know that the one item that we did discuss, I think when the changes were agreed to by the board regarding putting on a section for board or committee comments. And that issue was kind of tabled for a later date. So that's the only thing I think from my perspective that isn't here.
Okay. And that is a little something set. So the Belter versus Wayland and this guidance is for boards that are the primary reviewers, Mark. So that's a little different nuance. Thanks for your comments. Yeah. So in the case of a board where they are the reviewing body, that's where this guidance would be coming in. So any questions or comments? Do I have a show of hands, Mr. Nixon, Mr. Dietz, Mr. Rubenstein, to send out, put a date on this guidance document and send it out, the one in the packet? Everybody's good? Okay, great. Thank you very much. And again, I had asked Vanessa, to my knowledge, the Belter versus Wayland decision and the guidance has not changed. I looked up the Attorney General's website and it was the same guidance that was there a couple years ago, last time I visited this. All right. So the other question that I received.
I am absolutely committed, as I said last night, and as I said just now to my colleagues.
I'm hearing.
Sorry.
Okay. Someone is absolutely committed to something. It sounded very, very important. Thank you. Another question that came up was about a probationary review, and this was from a department head. You may recall that we left the field for probationary review on our form when we were evaluating it, since we do still have a 6-month review period. However, in speaking to this department head, I realized I was confused about the justification for leaving that on there. Personnel board only sees a review if it's accompanying a request for a raise. If a department head wants to review, any manager wants to review their employees periodically, whatever their practice is, we don't see those reviews unless they're coming for a raise. And last year we removed probationary raises from the SAP. So we really wouldn't be seeing a probationary review. So at first blush, I told the department head, sure, check off probationary review because it was the employee's first review. And then I said, wait a minute, let me talk to the board about it. I really think probationary reviews are now somewhat unnecessary from the board's perspective. So in this case, just to give it some context, we have an employee who was hired 7 months ago. So the department had asked me, do I need to do a probationary 6-month review and then do another review for the last month? And I said, no, just give us one review for the entire term of employment, which would be 7 months from October to April 30th. And is it a probationary review? So I thought I'd throw that out. I know we talked about this issue before. We thought, oh, it couldn't hurt to leave probationary review in there. But I think from the board's perspective, we don't really see probationary reviews anymore. So I open it up to the board for comment.
Yeah, I would just want to be careful that I think we still want supervisors doing probationary reviews, but I agree with you completely. We don't need to see those. There's no reason for us to see them. So I'm fine with taking it off the form, but I don't want to send a message that you don't need to do a probationary review.
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. Anybody else? So
I completely agree with Barry.
I agree with him too.
I don't want to, everybody's worked hard on this. I don't want to ask Mr. Purple to revise the form again. It's already gone out. I think the guidance that we came up with is pretty good, and I haven't heard a lot of confusion, and I think the process is rolling along. Ms. Hale has worked with IT to set up files. We see that the reviews are coming in. We're in a good place. So the guidance that I would give is feel free to use this form for an internal departmental probationary review. Use the field, check it off. But if it's coming to personnel board, it is no longer a probationary review. How does that sound? Okay.
Fine.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Fourth item in my report, liaison program. Just a reminder, we created the liaison program last September in response to reviews and what this board perceived as a mismatch between our expectations and what we saw in terms of review. So under the guidance, under the guidelines that we've put forward, the managers are doing the reviews now in the month of May. So just a polite, courteous reminder from the chair, this would be a really good time. If you haven't done so already, please check in with your departments, talk to them. I'd much rather see the issues worked out now and these sorts of questions answered than in June when we get a whole bunch of reviews and say, oh, what were they thinking? What a mismatch again. So, and to that end, I put the liaison list in your packet. It's at page 12. The color coding doesn't come out as well in grayscale, but all the information is there. If you're having issues connecting with your departments, please feel free to talk to me. I talk to department heads all the time, trying not to step on your toes, but from time to time, if they have requests of the board. And I know they appreciate the contact. So that's just my little my PSA about reaching out to your departments. And lastly, I received a new employee census from Payroll. Thank you, Mr. Valentine. I note that it will need to be updated with Miss Berry's new status, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. According to the new census I received, and I didn't put it into the packet, but any member of the board who would like, it's just a current list of the SAP employees, how many hours they work, their grade, their schedule. If any member of the board would like to see that, I use it, Vanessa uses it, we use it as a tracking sheet now for the performance evaluations that will be coming in May. It's a handy tool. And just to update the board, the latest census shows 41 full-time SAP employees, 17 part-time employees, and 6 library pages. I put them a little separate category. Those are currently all high school students and they don't get reviewed. So if any member of the board would like a copy of the census, please let me know. And I think that's it for my report. Oh, one other thing that Vanessa had, one other item from a previous meeting. that Ms. Hale followed up with me on. We were looking at the hiring letter, the template that she uses, and some board members had revisions and issues with the letter, and it was going lengthy into the meeting. So I asked that we cut off the conversation, and I asked that all board members send any revisions to the hiring letter template to Ms. Hale offline. So before she closed out this matter, she just wanted to make sure that she had all of your input. So I think Mr. Dietz, you specifically had some comments and questions. So it's not back on the agenda, except as, again, a gentle reminder, if board members have any input, please send that to Ms. Hale. All right, I think that's the end of my report. I turn it over 3B to the Personnel Director. I'm told Mr. Purple may want to talk to us about a second hire for the IT department. You have the floor, Mr. Purple.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the only update I have from the board at this point is that the Board of Selectmen and Advisory have unanimously agreed on a budget for FY22 for the IT department. As you may know, the new IT manager, Jay Montijo, has begun. He's been here, I think now 3 weeks, and is starting to settle in, and already we're seeing some of the reasons why we hired him. He's integrating himself nicely and starting to attack some things. So that's been good. Part of the FY22 budget, there has been general agreement that he needs a number 2, a full-time position to provide a level of redundancy, provide a level of coverage and a level of expertise for him to be able to focus on some of the bigger picture items. I think that Mr. Montijo is looking at hiring up the position more as a help desk systems administrator type position, and then also is going to leave some funding for some part-time assistance, some system admin help as well. That position really doesn't exist in the SAP at this point. And it may be that the position is hired under a contract in the short term, so that once we know what we have and we can begin to develop a job description, then that position can then be something that Personnel Board can vote on amending the SAP. I know we do have a special town meeting the selectmen have committed to in the fall, likely in October. I don't know whether this board would entertain making any changes at a fall town meeting to the SAP. There's no history to this because we historically don't have fall town meetings. So that may be something if the board wanted to consider that we could look at as we develop what that position could be and where it would be slotted in our Schedule A. So that is still a work in progress in terms of whether that funding actually happens. I guess hopefully if the weather holds up right and everything goes great, we'll know on May 23rd whether this is actually something that we're moving forward with.
Thank you for the report, Mr. Purple. I know throughout this period, I have spoken, I think, with Ms. Cook, the chair of advisory, and also perhaps members of the Municipal Technology Committee about the need for extra help, the cost of it with Ms. Cook, of course, the cost of extra help, and where that would dovetail with the SAP. And I'm always available to look at the SAP with folks who have a need and say where we could fit it in. In this case, we have, of course, the position that Mr. Montijo holds of IT manager at grade 8. And then I think the next thing that's a general might be a BA2, business assistant 2, and whether or not that would work for any of their needs. Personally, I would not have a problem at all. Love to hear from the board about presenting something for a fall town meeting. I think it's a great idea. The town has personnel needs, and to hold them up once a year because we have once a year town meeting always seemed to me, I wish we could meet more often. I know it's a huge production to have a town meeting, but if it's already in the works for other reasons, I am 100% in favor of trying to get folks the help they need, be it the IT department or anybody else. So love to hear from the other members of the board, whether or not you would entertain a request if the information was presented in time to try to add something to the SAP.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why we wouldn't. I think we want to show as much flexibility as we know this comes up from quite often, that we have a new position like this. So if we can accommodate that earlier than waiting till next year, I think no reason not to do it.
I agree.
I agree.
All right. And if anybody has vacation time scheduled, I guess now would be a good time to ask members of the board to just when you get a chance, send me your vacation schedule so we can start book. I know I've booked some time in the fall. So it would be good to just coordinate schedules and know when we can meet. If you care to share that information with me offline.
Madam Chair, just one other item since you bring up meetings.
Yes.
So and I get this is a personnel item as well. So the townhouse as well as the other town buildings, with the exception of the library, because the library is doing things a little bit differently. We're going to be opening back up to the public on June 1st. We're hoping to start the process. I know that Ms. Hale is working with Mr. Montijo to look at providing us the ability to do in-person meetings with a virtual component, because we can have maybe board members in the room, and maybe if you've got one or two appointments, they can come in, but we may be limited with capacity for the public. So we still are looking to try to have a virtual component and see how that's going to work. And I only say this because your comment about vacation schedules, it's been great in the world of Zoom, because you could be on vacation and you can still never miss a meeting. So as we start to transition back into in-person meetings, which I just can't wait for, to be honest with you, I'm really tired of this. It's going to be something where, we'll have to consider, if you're out of town, you may be out of luck. So that's something that I still think we're months away from that, but just to keep that on the radar, that change, probably will be coming. Unless Ms. Hale wants to correct me or knows something more updated, we're hoping that the governor is going to allow us to continue to use these virtual meetings and use Zoom for some of our boards and committees and everything, and not take away this as an option, given that, the pandemic is hopefully coming to a close in the next several months.
Ms. Hale, did you have a comment? I think.
No, we have no further update. We're waiting for news from the Attorney General and the Governor's office if that will be allowed going forward. But as of now, it's still in place.
Okay. I guess I was just thinking selfishly for myself. I took off family took off 1 week of the last 52, and I happened to have a Zoom meeting, and I lugged all my stuff and was AWOL for the most of the day preparing for the personnel board meeting. And for me, that's not really the essence of vacation. So whether we're in person or on Zoom, I would kind of like to schedule a meeting at least around whatever vacation time. I don't know how other people feel. I don't love scheduling a Zoom meeting in the middle of a family vacation if you're taking 1 week a year off. So, but thank you very much for that input, and mazel tov on the reopening of the town buildings. That is just great news all around. So, and I see that the library is open by appointment now.
Yes, they are.
That's terrific. Thanks very much for the update. All right, moving on to 3C, we have the Assistant Town Administrator, a report on new hires. That is in your packet at page 15. Ms. Hale, you have the floor.
Sure. As detailed in the memo dated May 5th, 2021, we have hired a new employee in the town clerk's office. Her name is Karen Garrity. She is the new part-time administrative assistant in the clerk's office. She dove right into her first annual town election yesterday, and I'm happy to see her here today, so we didn't scare her off. So I know our town clerk and assistant town clerk are very, very pleased with her. So she started at $24.60 per hour and began her employment on March 20th.
Terrific. Thank you, Ms. Hale. And again, a shout out to Mr. Hegarty's office for a great election, and to all the winners. and folks who are new in politics in town, to our new selectman, Mr. Dennington, and everybody else, and our new member of the Housing Board, Robert Braccio, a name that may be familiar to some in town. So carrying on a family legend of service to Southborough, and to everybody else, congratulations. And we look forward to working with Mr. Dennington when we get together with the Board of Selectmen, which we love to do. So that's it. We're on to old business. So you have in your packet, starting at page 14, a legal opinion from Norris, Murray, and Peliquin. Tim Norris is our town labor counsel, for anyone who may be listening in. Vanessa, do we have folks listening in with us today?
Yes, we have Selectman Braccio, Selectman Stivers, and Mr. Litt.
Great. Welcome to all of you. So this opinion, as you probably all remember, because it's not that long ago, we're just going back a few months, we had a visit from Mr. Malinowski of Advisory Committee asking this board to look at benefits under Section 11 of the bylaw, particularly vacation and sick leave. And he opined that these are a liability for the town and urged us to take a look at reforming vacation and sick leave. That led to a request for a legal opinion, a meeting and a request for legal opinion. I thank Mr. Rubenstein for being my +1 on that. A request for legal opinion went out, and this is the result that's in the packet. And thanks to Mr. Purple and Ms. Hale for helping us make this happen. So I guess my first question is, did everybody have a chance to look at the legal opinion, pages 14 to 18? And are there any comments on the legal opinion? Any questions? I know when I read it, I had a few questions. And I thought we'd have a discussion at the board level before we sent those to Mr. Norris. I also, just for your benefit, for this discussion of benefits generally, threw in a couple of other documents that I thought were relevant. One is at Bates 19. It is a summary of SAP employee benefits. This was prepared by Ms. Pasicane and Mr. Ballantyne's office. Thanks again. We're always thanking you, Brian. That is a theme here in Personnel Board. Thank you, Mr. Ballantyne. So that's a one-page summary of benefits. So it's relevant to the discussion, dated March 18th, 2019. And the second page at Bates 20, this is a policy from the Board of Selectmen's office dated November 3rd, 2016. It was provided to me in a packet of Board of Selectmen's policies many years ago by Ms. Hale, thank you. And it discusses benefits for certain positions and benefits and not benefits for others. So those were a couple things I thought were relevant to the discussion. So I'll open it up for comments, questions. And this, I will note, this opinion has been, I shared it with Mr. Malinowski. I think he's the vice chair of advisory. So to get the ball rolling, comments, questions on this decision, on this legal opinion?
I had a question for Barry. Can you explain the difference in the final paragraph of their recommendation for replacing other than for cause? How that wording changes?
So I think you're talking page 4 of the opinion, which is Bates 17, for anybody who's following along.
Yeah, I mean, what he's saying is, and he's correct, that when someone leaves the employment of the town for any reason, they're entitled to be paid whatever vacation they have accrued at that time. And I'm looking now for the language, 11B4. Pull it up. Okay. Yeah, it's not in 11B4.
Yeah, I didn't find that reference in 11B4. So just so folks who are listening, Mr. Norris recommends that we change the language in 11B4 of the SAP and replace it with language that's consistent with law. But the language he wants us to replace is not in 11B4.
It's 5. It's 11B5.
Okay.
So if you fire someone for a cause, they're still entitled to be paid any accrued vacation. That's the point he's making, and that other than for cause language needs to be taken out.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Nixon?
It does.
Yeah.
I just, if, in other words, if you're terminating somebody for cause, how does that affect?
Still get their vacation, Dave.
Yeah, either way.
We distinguish. We're like, if you're at fault, if we're terminating you, separating you for some fault of yours, for cause, whatever that may be,
Right.
you forfeit. And Mr. Norris is saying, no, that's not the law. The law is it's a benefit that they receive regardless of the reason. So rather than saying for cause in 11B5, he would have us say upon separation.
Okay.
The Wage Act does not distinguish between employees who are terminated for cause and those who are not. So we do, and we shouldn't. It's a recommendation that we change it. All right.
Okay.
So as a threshold matter, I was really interested in his discussion of part-time versus full-time. I'm always wondered how we got to a place where we have what I would call a pretty liberal policy. Anybody over 20 hours is full-time. And I told Vanessa I would look back. I have at my house the SAP from town meeting warrant going back 15 years. I think 2006 was the first year I had, and it was there. So it's modern history. At least 15 years, the SAP has had the same definition of full-time and part-time that Mr. Norris is asking us, recommending that we reconsider. And he also notes that our union contracts, the collective bargaining agreement, have different definitions. And I do have copies of those. If anyone, does everybody have copies of, I know from time to time we talk about whether or not we should have parity with the unions, or at least we look to see what the union provisions are. I have copies of those contracts. They're public documents. You can get them from Mr. Purple's office, or I can send them to you. I did take a look at those. Those are also footnoted in Mr. Norris's opinion. Two of the contracts hew to the more standard 40 hours per week. So I don't know how you all want to proceed. There's the do nothing option, which I don't really like. Most of us don't like the do nothing option. There's the study it further option. There's the think about it some more option. I mean, it's a big issue. And for me, a threshold question is, are we trying to be consistent with the union contracts? I know we've heard from Mr. Purple in the past on some things, the union contracts borrow from the SAP, or the benefit is the same, except where it's not the same. And I don't know if we have an official policy. We've discussed whether or not we want to be more consistent with the union contract. So I guess maybe a first step for me would be to have everybody on the board take a look at the union contracts. And I can send those to you, or Vanessa can send them to you. We have 3 collective bargaining agreements right now. Am I correct? In process, we have the DPW, the fire, and the police. Is that correct? Just the 3?
There are 4.
4. What am I missing?
The communications officers, full-time dispatchers.
Oh, because they're, yeah, I don't think I have a copy of those.
I
Okay.
can shoot out the current contracts to the full board.
Yeah, so everyone can see for themselves how full-time, part-time is defined. But as a threshold question, is it when you're considering Mr. Malinowski's request that we look at this, do you want to just consider it as an SAP matter? Or do you want, before we start to do the work of looking at the union contracts, do you feel that you want to look at it townwide? I guess to me, that's kind of a threshold question for the board.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it'd be helpful. I also have a question about, and maybe seeing the census would help me. Do we have employees who are working more than 20 but less than 37 and a half? I mean, is there a population in that category? Or are we just talking about, we've got 37 and a half hour employees and then employees who work less than 20?
I think there are a few, but
Right.
that number has dwindled a lot over the last few years. I can think of one, perhaps Brian in the fire department.
Clerk.
I've got a census here. I can run down the hours. So just so you know, I took the census that Brian and Kristen send me. Theirs is alphabetical. I cut and paste into full-time, part-time. I like to color code because it's easier for me to see things. So I'm running down the list. So it's expressed in bi-weekly hours. So divide by 2. Is that right, Brian? 39 hours. I don't know if we want to do this whole thing now. So I'm looking for a number that's less than 80 and more than what? What's the question, Barry? Employees who are less than 80
More than 20?
40?
and
Well-
more than less than 70.
40.
You want less than 75, right? Because you said 37 and a half.
I mean, that's just a number I picked because I thought that's sort of the standard, but whatever the standard is,
All
since
right.
we don't define it.
So I have on a full-time schedule, someone who's at 64 hours.
Okay.
All right. Then I have 80, 80, 80, 80, 80. It's a majority of 80s, a 76. I'm going down the list. I have a 60. I have someone who's on the full-time schedule at 60 hours. 80, 80, 80, 76, 76. I have a 64. So I think that was 3 in the 60s for the full-time. And then on the part-time, I don't know why we have somebody on the part-time at, oh, okay, sorry, 39. So we're not concerned about, are you concerned about the part-times?
No,
Okay.
not so much.
Okay,
So I guess my point is that if we were to define full-time as, pick a number, 35, 37 and a half, there is some group of employees who would be losing some benefits.
yep, we have one employee at the Council on Aging, the outreach coordinator at 64 hours a week. Everybody else appears to be between 76 and 80 until I get, and the first name on the list is Kathy Berry, but she's going to change. She's going to be full-time, right, guys? Okay. She was on the part-time as of the time this census was printed. So, all right. So we've got one employee at the Council on Aging at 32 hours a week. And we have the admin assistant at the fire department showing 32 hours a week. And one at the youth commission, the program coordinator is 60 hours per week. So I think Vanessa and Brian were right on the money. 3 employees who would be affected. You said less than a handful. So thank you, Barry. That was a worthwhile exercise. So I don't know if you feel like Attorney Norris's opinion is the end of your inquiry. I note with respect to a, full-time, part-time, he lists half a dozen towns. They're not necessarily our comparable towns. It's great data to have. I don't know if we want to look at more towns. Maybe, I don't know if that's something Ms. Hale could do on her listserv, rather than have me call 351 towns.
Of
Vanessa,
course,
Could
if you
you,
want me to start with our comparable town list, that's fine. Or if you want to go broader, just let me know what the board's preference is.
for me personally, this doesn't, other than the fact that we compete with, for some positions, we compete with a geographic region and we try to look at towns that are similarly situated. For this, I just think any data on how cities and towns define full-time, part-time would be interesting. In my mind, I don't see a divider to me, it's just more a majority of towns say 37.5. I don't know that I can't see a rationale for just targeting our comparables. It's not like salary data. I know, anybody else have a different opinion, or would you be interested in just seeing some more data on what full-time, part-time is?
Yeah, for me, more data is good. I'm not that fussy about the geographic area.
Yep. All right, so Vanessa, if you could get us some more data for our June meeting on I don't know if you can send out an email to your listserv and say, hey, folks, how do you define full-time, part-time?
Yep.
If union is different than non-union, that's good to know. I think it's for the members of the board to decide whether or not, as I look through these union contracts, we're not on all fours with them, obviously. And the firefighters are completely different because of the nature of the shifts that they do. So I do note that in the collective bargaining agreements, they have the same line about carrying over a year's worth of vacation. So maybe Vanessa, if we could start with you sending the union contracts out to the board members, everyone can look and we can discuss this again in June. I just have a question. The part of all this, of the vacation leave that Mr. Malinowski found, and he's not here with us, is that correct? I invited him to join the discussion. Was the line in the SAP, just so we're all focused on it, under 11, section 11B3, second sentence, an employee shall be permitted to carry over the following year 1 year's worth of earned vacation. And that is in the union contracts that I was looking at. So if the question is if it's objectionable in the SAP, is it objectionable as well? Is there any difference, Mr. Purple, since we have you back here, how that carryover? You were here when Mr. Malinowski was here, and I guess the concern was he wants the vacation leave to expire at a certain point, so nobody has more than 1 year's worth at any time.
I think
Language is the same in the CBAs, except for maybe one. I haven't seen one of them, the communications. The language may be the same. Is it treated the same, or is there an expiry in the union contracts? Do you know?
I'd have to go back and take a look at the language specifically, because there are, while all of them tend to address it, sometimes there's little quirks that make them that much a little bit different. So I don't want to speak out of turn. For example, this is just another example for holidays. Some of, they all list the holidays, but I think there's one of them that has a line in there that said, and any other holiday that every other bargaining group and employee gets. So in other words, if we forgot to list something, but everybody else has it, we get that too. Type of thing. So yeah, there's little quirks like that in some of those agreements that that make things just a little bit different. So I would have to look at that.
Don't tell my kids about that line. That could be very problematic when raising multiple children. Anyway, thank you for, not to make light of it, thank you for a great point. So I guess where we're at is we will table further action to our June meeting. Ms. Hale will get some more information for us. Thank you very much. If you would send out the full union contracts. And Mr. Purple, if you would take a look at vacation leave and let us know if it's treated the same way. You've got the global view, being
Sure.
the personnel director for everybody. And if anybody has any thoughts on this, any data as you look at Mr. Norris's opinion, if you have additional data you'd like. Barry, you look like you're getting ready to say something.
Well, I'm just going to say for the June meeting, we may want to formally invite Jason or other members of the advisory committee, because it seems to me, part of this obviously is financial driven. And so we sort of know what they're hoping to accomplish. There are other pieces of it. Obviously, we want to remain competitive with other towns, and there are other factors. It's not just money driven, but I think for us, we need some direction of what they're hoping to achieve through this. So that would be helpful for me.
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. Excellent point, and I will extend that invitation. The other question that occurs to me, so when the unions go in and they bargain and there's folks on both sides and they come up with a policy, I feel like doesn't obviously happen at the SAP stage. There's no bargaining with employees. We hear requests, in this case from the financial folks who have a point of view. At some point, do we want to invite all the SAP employees to come talk to us? Do we want to have a hearing type of thing? And would that be June? Or would you rather, just to be clear, we're not trying to do anything for this year's SAP. This would be recommendations to town meeting for next spring for the following year. And if things go along as we hope, I would imagine, hopefully we're having an indoor annual town meeting in March of 2022. That's the goal. So our work would be wrapped up in the January or February timeframe. Just my sense off the top of my head is to maybe gather more information, speak with advisory, think about whether or not we want to invite employees. I know we're heading into summertime, but I really would, other than the fact that this is always on our agendas are public. To be clear, any SAP employee who is interested in knowing what we do, they all know we're here. We meet once a month. We're very predictable, and we have a detailed agenda that gives everybody notice under open meeting law of what we're going to be discussing. So this will go above and beyond and say, we're considering a change to your benefits. Please come talk to us. Is there a sense that you want to start inviting folks in June, or you want to have another meeting and then discuss that aspect later on? Love to hear from the board.
My own preference would be to put anything like that off. I get a little concerned because if we do anything at all, I mean, we may decide not to do anything, but if we do something, it strikes me that it's going to be some kind of reduction in benefits. It's going to be something with sick leave or something that is going to be seen by the employee population, rightfully so, as something being taken away from them. And so I don't expect to have employees come forward and say, great idea, we want to see more of that. And so while I think we want to make the process as open as possible and give employees every opportunity to voice the concerns we have, I'd sort of like to have some direction in our mind what we're doing before we do that. Not saying we've made a final decision, but that you have to understand there's a risk to that kind of thing. When you have the employees come together and all say, we don't want you to do it, and then you do it, there's an obvious downside to that. And you have to think about what the possible repercussions of that will be. So I don't want to just jump into that until we've thought all that through.
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. It occurs to me that one of the dividing lines, so in the original request for legal services, we asked Mr. Norris he had already confirmed for us on the phone, you cannot take away existing banked vacation leave. And that is in his opinion, just to be clear, if anyone else is listening. That is page 3 of his opinion, Bates 16. Any amendment has to be prospective in nature. The Personnel Board may not take away accrued vacation time from existing employees without compensating them. This would be considered a wage forfeiture. And then everyone was pretty clear at the time that you can change the SAP for a future class of employees. So, for example, for all employees hired after July 1st, 2022, we're going to cut this. The part I did not know, and the part that I asked about was, can we change prospective benefits for existing employees? So Betty Sue has been working for the town for 20 years. She's banked vacation. We can't touch it. But can we say, Betty Sue, moving forward, we're going to have a less generous policy for the vacation for the years that you work moving forward? And I believe Mr. Norris's opinion answers that, yes, we can do that. For existing employees, we can change benefits prospectively. He says at the top of page 4, Bates 17, in accordance with the advisory, the town may prospectively revise its vacation leave policies. So I think that is, I don't know, is that something that you needed clarification on, Barry? Is it as clear to you as it is to me?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
All right.
right.
So I think that's going to be part of it, that folks are going to be, the sensitivity that you talked about and the types of reactions we're going to get. I don't know what happened in the past when they changed vacation moving forward, but the new class of folks who are going to be affected haven't been hired yet. You're not going to be having people coming in saying, oh, I'm not so sure you should cut things back for new employees. I think the controversy will be existing employees curtailed benefits moving forward.
Right.
And that's something we certainly want to think about carefully, how we get that input. So thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. All right.
Can I ask one question of Mark on sick leave? Because this occurred to me as I was reading this. Have you ever had employees who are about to retire just take 3 months of sick leave before that they've accrued, rather than just take the 20% payout that the SAP provides?
So I'm sneaking a glance at Mr. Valentine, but my answer was going to be no. Most people, they take the buyout. I mean, it's really, it hasn't been an issue. So like I said, that shouldn't be, I don't think that should be the concern.
Harry, the only time that's happened, and Vanessa probably knows this too, is when a person has been out on a medical leave, like an approved medical leave or something like that, and then they have to separate from service for some reason or another. But that's never happened except for that.
Okay, but there's nothing in the SAP to prevent someone from doing that I can see.
Well, they'd probably have to have correct me if I'm wrong, Vanessa, but we would have to get
Medical note.
proof of medical, yeah, some type of medical issue, right?
But the SAP only says they need that before they can return to work. If they're never going to return to work, I don't think there's anything that requires them to document their medical condition while they're out.
True, but I think that is a great clarification, point that maybe should be written into the bylaw, Mr. Rubenstein. But if someone had been out for, more than a week or two, either myself or the department head would be in contact with them and say, okay, can you share with us, your anticipated return to work, et cetera. And a note, we would probably get a note through that sort of conversation and communication.
Yeah.
Not required until someone comes back.
Yeah. Anyway, that just occurred to me as I was reading it. it's not something we need to waste the board's time on now, but anyway.
Thank you, Rick. I just had a question. I worked in a variety of private settings. I worked in a law firm where there was none of this. And then briefly for a corporation, where when I was going to be out for 5 days, I did have to talk to a nurse and hand something in. Why do we not require proof of illness for an extended leave? Is that typical in municipalities? They just call up and say, I'm going to be out for 3 weeks. And we say, okay, bring a doctor's note before you return to work?
I mean, a lot of times it's tied to someone going out on FMLA leave. So, the communication and the documentation may be handled through the FMLA medical forms, which are signed by someone's doctor. So normally that's how we receive that communication.
Family medical leave is maternity, paternity, correct?
Or a serious health condition of yourself or care of a family member with a serious health condition.
Oh, okay, so it does include personal illness.
It does.
And it says what with regard to a note?
It's required that it be completed by the person's doctor or psychiatrist or medical provider at a
In
high
order
level.
to get the leave in the first place, to have it approved?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
and that's not reflected anywhere in the SAP?
It really isn't, no.
Okay. Maybe it should.
Adding a reference to the FMLA policy probably would be wise in the next revision.
Yeah, because it says 11C5, sick leave policies and practices will be prepared and established under the direction of the Personnel Board. But if you're telling me it's largely covered, like, are all personal sick leaves covered by FMLA now? What's the difference? I'm sorry, I'm ignorant in this area. What's the difference? What would be an FMLA leave and what wouldn't for a personal illness?
If you if you didn't qualify, you have to work a certain number of hours to qualify for FMLA. So it wouldn't apply to a staff person that only works, a shorter number of hours, and you have to work for the, community for a certain amount of time to be eligible.
But sick leave is only applicable to full-time employees.
Right. Anyone working less than 20 hours wouldn't be receiving any sick time or FMLA leave.
Okay, so I guess if our sick leave policy is only applicable to full-time employees, there's a subset of full-time employees who are not under FMLA?
It depends on how many hours they're budgeted for in their
Okay.
department, and do they fit the criteria to be eligible for FMLA?
Okay, if you could pull together,
Sure.
do you have a packet on FMLA that you
I
give
do.
employees?
Yep.
Could you send that to us? I think it might be
Sure.
worth taking a look at. It seems to me that this board should know more about FMLA. Jay, you probably could teach a seminar on FMLA, but I think the whole board should see this as we consider the sick leave.
I just want to turn to Brian and think if he left anything out that he'd like to chime in on, if
Okay.
I left anything out.
Well, I just want to make note that Mr. Norris, in his opinion on page 4, references Massachusetts Paid Family and Medical Leave, PFML, and says we are not subject to it, but we are subject to the federal.
So that's two different things.
Okay.
FMLA leave, family medical leave that applies to municipalities. Paid family medical leave does not. That's a
Okay.
private sector benefit.
All right.
Right. And the other thing is FMLA leave is unpaid. Keep that in mind. So
Yeah.
we're talking about sick leave, we're talking about paid time off.
Okay.
Don't they usually get their sick time first? That expires and then they jump into their FMLA. So you
Right, but
sick time is used up first.
right, but as you know, Jay, in the private sector,
Right.
they get 5 sick days a year or something,
Yeah.
not
Right, that's right, it's nothing.
But, okay, so FMLA, which some of our full-time employees will get, is relevant to sick leave because it goes into how many days they get that later can be compensated when they leave. Right? So FMLA, even though it's unpaid leave, is relevant to looking at sick leave in town. Are you saying it's not?
You don't
Well, I
get
guess I'm,
either.
What?
You're not gonna get paid out at sick leave at the end of the time either when you leave.
No. Okay, under the sick leave provision, we're not talking about people only getting leave they'll get, all sick leave days are, I don't know how to put this, because are you telling me that the fact that folks go under FMLA to take their sick leave, which is relevant to whether or not they give a note or not, has nothing to do with our inquiry about paid sick leave, that we don't need to look at FMLA?
Well, employees, if they have sick leave, can use sick leave while they're on FMLA leave. So it can run consistently. So they're still getting, their normal paycheck if they have sick leave available to them to draw upon.
I got into the FMLA discussion because somebody brought up the fact that we don't require a note for someone to come back. We require a note for someone to come back to work.
Mhm.
Okay. But under FMLA, it's a different requirement. Is someone telling me that we don't need to look at FMLA to understand 11C, or we should?
I guess I'm confused. If someone is taking leave under the paid leave policy, they're not going to seek FMLA benefits, are they?
Well, if they're out for their own serious health condition, we strive to put them on FMLA leave. If it's a qualifying reason for that leave. Simultaneously, they are using sick time if they have sick time available to them. So they're getting, their normal paycheck, their deductions are still going through payroll and so forth.
But if you've got an employee who's accrued 3 months of sick leave, and they don't claim a serious health condition, they claim, I just got this flu and it won't go away. I'm just trying to see, so you're going to then seek documentation from them under the FMLA. It just seems strange to me, because the reason the FMLA is there is to allow people time off without jeopardizing their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have that situation in the municipality because you have such long paid sick leave periods, or people can accrue so much. It's certainly much less of an issue. And again, this is new to me. I'm not used to thinking in the public sector. I don't know from the employee's perspective why you would ever, unless, it's not your illness, it's your wife is having a baby or something like that, where you might want to use it. But for your own illnesses, why they would ever seek any benefits under the FMLA?
Saw that Mark unmuted.
Yeah,
I didn't know if
I'm just,
he had a comment.
we really have gone on a real off ramp here.
Yeah.
on the discussion, and I'm just trying to find a way to either further it or end it. But
Mark, let me just suggest this. Section C says, Section 5 says, sick leave administrative policies and practices will be prepared and established under the direction of the Personnel Board. We haven't done that. I think the first step is for us to understand how sick leave is administered.
right.
And we have paid sick leave, which is a policy of the town that's here. But it dovetails with FMLA because we don't require a note until people return. And the answer to why we don't require a note until people return is because some people are under FMLA. So I think what we need to start with is a summary of FMLA. And maybe I misread Vanessa's comments. It sounds like you all have the opportunity to work with folks to slot their vacation in one or the other. Vanessa made a comment. I don't want to put words in her mouth. We try to fit this into FMLA where appropriate, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so does that mean the employee doesn't have an option?
I think if someone is out, if we know that an employee is out for a qualifying reason under FMLA, we often will, talk with Labor Council if we think it's necessary, or we will send that person the FMLA paperwork and say, we believe the reason you're out right now is an FMLA situation. Here is the appropriate paperwork. Please have your doctor complete it and return it to us.
And are they under coercion to do that and take unpaid FMLA versus paid sick leave? Or whose option is it?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not sure the word coercion is is the right way to put that, Betsy.
Who has the decision? Who's the decision maker? The employee, you're sending them a packet, you're informing them of FMLA. Do they come back? I guess I don't know enough about FMLA. I haven't been in this situation.
Well,
I'm a little confused.
yeah, and I guess the suggestion, and I think you started to go there already, is rather than sit here and try and do this off the cuff, because it really is situational, for whether or not, there may be a person who comes to us who has a planned surgery and a recovery period, and they're going to want, to go on FMLA so that they can take intermittent time for that recovery and for the surgery. You may have an employee, with a different situation that it makes sense that we're going to require that employee to use FMLA, because there are other circumstances that, that'd be beneficial to the town and the employee that they do that. So the request may come from us rather than coming from the employee. But I think it's better to put something together so that, because what's happening is we're answering one particular issue and it then gets all, questions which, are kind of blossoming into other things. So I think it's better if we go back and put something together and send it to you to have it in front of you, which may make it easier to understand.
Fair point. Just from the bird's eye view, the way I see it, this board is tasked with, whether we've done it or not, putting together sick leave, admin policies and practices. And clearly, at least speaking as chair, I don't really understand how sick leave works. So I think that's an excellent suggestion, Mr. Purple. So if you want to prepare, send us do you have a policy or practice in the selectman's office in writing for this, along with the summary of the FMLA, whatever you would send employees? I think it's incumbent upon me to get a handle on it. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. But it seems to me, at least for this subset of 60 employees, personnel board is supposed to understand this process. And at present, I do not. And at one point, Mr. Purple used the word may require them to use FMLA. So it sounds like the employer is the ultimate decider. I may have jumped the gun and said coerce. As an attorney, I sometimes see things in black and white. Who's the decision maker? Who ultimately makes the decision? Obviously, you try to have a cordial relationship. You examine each request for leave. But ultimately, is the decision maker the employer or the employee as to whether it falls under FMLA, if you know?
It's the employer.
The employer. Okay, great. So thank you very much for bringing all this up. Board members, does that make sense to you? You'll get an informational packet and we'll take it from there in June. Does that work for you? All right. In the meantime, if you all think of any other questions relevant to sick leave or vacation leave, feel free to send them to Mark and Vanessa so that they can get a scoop on this. Brian, do you want to be copied on all this, or do you want to just have Mark and Vanessa reach out to you when they need to? Your option. I'm happy to copy you on it.
Yeah, copy me on it if you don't mind, Betsy.
Sounds good. Okay, everybody. Thank you all, and thank you for volunteering to put that all together. Okay, next item on our agenda is 4B, town meeting. Just to wrap up, I think the board has done all the work it needs to do. I have put in the packet, starting at page 21, is the salary administration plan track changes, and this will be a handout at town meeting. Town meeting commences next Saturday, not this coming, the following Saturday, May 22nd. This handout will be there along with pages 38 through 41, which is the section by section detail. We've been doing this for a few years now. It seems to work well. Mr. Hegarty has had the copies made for the last 3 years. I think he has paid for them. I told him this year we would be happy. We have money in the budget and we will pay for the photocopying of the handouts. And he has told me they are available. I don't know how he does it. While running the election, he's filing things and sending me an email telling me my handouts are ready. So any questions about the handouts? Any questions about town meeting? I think we covered this at our last meeting. All right, seeing no hands, we will go on to 4C, policies. We have a couple policies in the packet at page 43 and 44. You can see I've stamped them second drafts. The first one is a draft policy on performance evaluations for part-time and seasonal workers. We had a preliminary discussion of this, followed by reaching out to boards and departments. Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein, who reached out to some of his departments. I also heard separately, or I can't remember at this point, I know Barry reached out to some of his managers. I reached out to others. And this is what I came up with in terms of a policy on evaluations. And this is section 7A of the SAP. So we actually changed the SAP a year or two ago. 7A requires that a performance evaluation in a form approved by the board accompany all requests for raises. And then we took the step of saying perhaps some seasonal workers and part-time workers would not need an evaluation under a policy to be crafted by us. So this is an attempt to craft that policy. So comments or questions on the draft policy on page 43? Does it make sense to the board?
Yep.
Jay, you're muted. You're talking, but
I'm good.
okay. Mr. Nixon, Mr. Rubenstein?
Looks
muted
good to
because
me.
My phone keeps ringing, so I just don't want to have it keep ringing during the meeting.
Oh, all right. Thank you, Jay. Yeah, so I think it makes sense not to have election workers and wardens, periodic workers, also the high school library pages. I think between Barry and myself, we spoke to most, if not all of the department heads who have these employees, and this is what makes sense. And I don't think it makes any sense to try to do evaluations of the camp counselors. We heard from maybe I was in, do you have recreation, Barry? Was that one of yours? You
Yes.
spoke to Tim Davis? Okay. And I can't remember if I have spoken to Mr. Davis or if he's spoken to us. Makes sense. He has his own internal review process. I think you reported to me on this. So involving parents and staff. So, all right. So if the board is in agreement, do you want to study this more? Are you ready to approve page 43 as a policy? Mr. Nixon, you're muted, sir. You're muted, Dave.
Dave, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Dave. Dave. Can you unmute?
Yeah.
All right. Did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to say I'm prepared to vote for it.
Okay, great. So the chair will make a motion that the personnel board pass a policy in the form of page in the form in the packet on page 40. Okay.
The draft.
Are we at least on our second hour before I start to lose it? Okay, yeah, I'll take the second draft stamp off. All right, so we've got a motion to approve the policy in page 43 on employee performance evaluations for salary increases under section 7A. Maybe the title should be changed. Policy on employee performance evaluations for certain employees? Or for schedule C and F employees? Because as currently written, the title suggests that it's for everybody, and it's not. It's just for C and F.
Sorry.
Yes, Ms. Hale, you had a comment?
I liked what you just said about Schedule C and Schedule F. I think when we're looking for a file on our network, that will pop out right away what that really means.
All right, so I'm gonna amend my own draft to say policy on employee and performance evaluations for salary increases for Schedule C and F employees. All right, so do I have a second on the motion for this policy?
Second,
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. This will be a roll call vote as I guess I'm just going alphabetical order. Mr. Dietz,
Yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes,
Mr. Rubenstein,
yes,
and Ms. Rosenblum votes in the affirmative. Thank you. 4-2. All right, the second policy is on page 44. This is a policy on eligibility of new employees for salary increases. This is also a second draft. The first time you saw this policy, it was 6 months. Then we got some feedback from Mr. Dietz that that's too long. He'd like it to be 3 months. So the policy in the packet, and you'll see some lighter type. I forgot to tell the clerk to do this in color. It's kind of hard when they reproduce the packets, but I highlighted the changes in red, but it comes out in gray in the packet.
Okay.
So employees would now be eligible for salary increases if they've been in the employ of the town for 3 months. And this applies to the new hire situation. And I think you're all aware of the issue. Yes, Mr. Rubenstein.
just a question, why did we take out the words "at least"? So in one, it says for 3 months instead of saying for at least 3 months.
Yes, you want to put at least back
Yeah, I
in.
would put
Yeah.
it there and in example A as well.
All right. So the first paragraph would say, when they have been in town employment. Yeah, no, I don't think there's a sound rationale, even though I did it for at least 3 months. So the only change in that paragraph, 6 is out, 3 is in. And then on 2A, you would add for at least 3 months.
right.
All right. And again, I don't think I need to go through the whole debate. It was in the minutes. Everybody's aware of the issues, trying to find a happy interval for new employees. This issue came up as a result of synchronization. We don't want to review folks who haven't been here long enough to have a review. But then again, we don't want to keep folks waiting up to 22 or 23 months for review. So any comments now that, Jay, now that you see it in writing, is this work for you?
Fine.
All right.
Good.
Are we ready to move to approve this policy?
So move.
All right. So so Dave is making a motion to approve the policy with the addition of the word "at least."
At least.
The term "at least" in paragraph 1 and 2A.
Second,
And should we add "at least" under 2B? They will not have been in the employ of the town for at least 3 months. Yeah, I think we should add "at least" in 1, 2A, and 2B. All right, so that's
Correct.
Dave's motion that I just made for you. So we have a motion to approve a policy on eligibility of new employees for salary increases as presented in the packet at page 44 with the addition of the term "at least."
At least.
All right, this will be a roll call vote. Mr. Dietz,
Yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes,
Mr. Rubenstein,
yes,
and the chair votes in the affirmative, 4-0. Thank you. Thank you for helping make my dream of putting written policies in place. Much appreciated. Thank you, folks. All right, we're on to new business, departmental requests. The first item is we have a request to set starting salary for Katie Berry as administrative assistant for the BOS Treasurer's Office. This is at page 45. This will be presented by Ms. Hale. Ms. Hale, you have the floor.
Thank you. There is a memo in your packet, as the chair just noted, detailing our request. Katie Berry was appointed recently by the Board of Selectmen to take up the full-time position previously held by Carol Ostrich, who retired in November after 18 or 19 years with the town. Katie was a part-time admin, as you may know, to the Zoning Board of Appeals as an employee in the building department. So we are requesting that her salary be set at $24.50 per hour effective May 10th. I will add that she is also, we have shifted duties a little bit since Carol was here for many years. We took a look at that. Katie will also be supporting Brian's department, of course, helping him with, phone and counter and all of the customer service type inquiries that come into the treasurer's department. She will also be supporting the conservation agent and the IT manager, who have no other administrative support staff. So things like payable, payroll, some light administrative work, etc. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. I would also note that she handles payable, the occasional payable for Personnel Board, as did Ms. Ostrich before. Comments, questions from the board? I'll just remind the board, this salary is right on point with the salary for a new hire. This is under promotions because Ms. Berry is already an employee.
I do have one question.
Yes, Mr. Dietz.
Just want to check the math. So if it's 2246 with 9%, that comes to 2448.
Thank you, Mr. Dietz. I believe the note says the memo says it is duly noted that this is slightly above 9%. So if 9% would be 2448,
Yep, I'm fine
requested
with that.
salary of 2450 is slightly above 9%.
Yep, I'm fine with it. Just wanted to throw it out.
Okay, great. Any comments, questions, or concerns? I was just going to say that this is on a par to the salary we set for the administrative assistant, the new administrative assistant, Ms. Garrity, in the town clerk's office a month or two ago, or at the last meeting, one of the recent meetings. I don't remember if it was our last meeting or the meeting before. So
I'll move that we accept the requested new rate of $24.50 for Katie Berry.
thank you, Mr. Nixon.
Second.
We have a second. This will be a roll call vote. Thank you. Mr. Dietz,
Yes.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes,
and Ms. Rosenblum also votes in the affirmative. Congratulations to Ms. Berry. We look forward to working with her if we can find her. She's going to clone herself and be in 4 different departments at once, and best of luck to her. So,
Thank you very much.
all right, thank you. And 5B, we have a request for funding for some diversity, equity, and inclusion training. That's the last time I'm going to say it outright. We'll call it DEI, but for those who may not know, diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And this is at page 46 of your packet, and this will be presented by Ms. Hale and Mr. Purple. You have the floor. I'm not sure who wanted to speak on this.
Okay, I'll start. As detailed in the memo, the Board of Selectmen had DEI as one of their focus areas for this current year. It's been really hard to conduct employee training, not knowing when we would all be back in the building together. So we would like to move forward and schedule a session, as I've described, with Callie Ritter, who is someone that we have used many times before. She's come in and done sessions for our employees on customer service, dealing with difficult and challenging people, code of conduct, and so forth. So she comes highly recommended through our insurance company, as well as our peers that Brian and Mark and I often talk to about employee trainings. This is a session that would be virtual, of course, for at least the next few months. Most of what we're seeing will still be held in a virtual format. It is a cost of $4,000 for 3 sessions that she would deliver over Zoom. The Board of Selectmen have agreed, they did speak about this recently in one of their own meetings, and have agreed to split the cost. So we are looking for the support of the Personnel Board for $2,000 to hold this training. I will also add that this would be, there's a cap of 20 people in the session. So we would do this for department heads first. And then we are in conversation with our insurance company to see if they can support funding additional training for the rest of our town employees. I'll leave that there and see if the board has any questions or if Mr. Purple has anything he wanted to add.
So with this, Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
don't think I have anything. I'm sorry, Dave. I don't think I have anything to add. I think the memo speaks to it well. And again, this is something I think that the board had identified as a goal to do. And given the trajectory of the pandemic, we've not had, really that opportunity. And I think as Ms. Hale said, there aren't a lot of people, a lot of consultants out there doing the DEI training right now. And so we have a limited selection to choose from. However, we have worked with Ms. Ritter in the past. She has done good things for us, and she does come recommended from our insurance company, because a lot of the work that we've done with her has been through them.
Thank you, Mr. Purple. Just by way of background, you may remember this was raised when we had our annual joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. I believe that was October. And Mr. Healy mentioned this. It had been enunciated as a goal of the Board of Selectmen, I think back in the summertime when they had their goal setting meeting, and was a goal of Mr. Healy's. And I said at the time that the board, we did not personally have the resources. I had done when we had been, I had been told in advance of the meeting, and I think I had watched the selectmen's meetings and knew this was going to come up. I Googled DEI training and got 51 million hits. So I believe what I told the board in short, and I think you were all at that meeting, this board did not have the resources to evaluate DEI training, but certainly would entertain partnering with the Board of Selectmen if they took the lead on finding a trainer and finding an appropriate training. So I think that's what Ms. Hale has done. She has set the plate for us. So I myself have not attempted to find appropriate training, but had extended that the board, and you all heard this, would participate in partnering with the Board of Selectmen. And the other thing is, if you look back at Bates, page 5, it's the expenditure ledger. I would just draw your attention to the fact that we started the fiscal year with $3,200 for employee development. That's line item ending 53070. We paid out 885 of that to an employee. We have remaining in the budget 2315 for a request of $2,000. And now I'll open it up to the board. Mr. Nixon, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I had been looking at where we have paid out money under employee development. I was just wondering if it might not come under management consulting, so that we still have some money in category 53070.
Technically, Mr. Nixon, it could come out of either. That line item, in my experience, has been used for the legal and HR consulting fees when we do a study. And that's where we'll pay the fees to Mr. Norris for the MIPA study that is ongoing, that we are going to get a report on in June. Sorry, I haven't addressed that yet. As you recall, the second half of what we've asked Mr. Norris to do is he is looking at our salary study that was prepared in-house by our employees. That has been forwarded to him for a MIPA analysis. So there will be some legal fees. I have no idea right now, Dave, what those legal fees would be. But yes, you are correct. If there's money in the Dave is speaking of the 53020 management consulting professional line item, there's no reason we couldn't pay something out of that. But right now, Vanessa, you're asking for employee development. You're not asking specifically what budget it comes out of, right?
No, I think either line would be sufficient.
Okay. But just to let you know, so Dave is correct. We had $13,000 in the management line item. We have $9,500 remaining. We have paid out $34.99, so $3,500, and that is for our online tool that is used in hiring. So either line item would be available, but the money is there in employee development. And I think you said, Vanessa, this training would be first for managers?
Correct.
But all employees, are they all employees of an SAP, or is this, would it include non-SAP employees?
I think in general, yes, the Board of Selectmen are looking for a training that would cover all our employee groups. But covering every single one of those people does come down to funding. So we're starting with department heads.
Starting with department heads. So roughly how many people would be included in this $4,000 training?
20.
20 people, and those would include contract employees who are not SAP employees and
Yes,
some
it
department
would-
heads who are SAP employees.
Correct.
All right. So yeah, so that may be an issue for the board. We're not being asked to 100% fund this. We're being asked to 50% fund this.
Right.
And we do have department heads under the SAP who would be invited to this training if we just want to glance. So we have the Director of Facilities, Mr. Parent. He would be eligible for this training, correct?
Mhm.
The Library Director, Mr. Donovan, would be eligible. Our new IT manager would be eligible. The Police Lieutenant, would he be eligible, or is it just the Police Chief at this point?
Right now, just the chief.
Okay. So the Director of the Council on Aging. So there are 3 SAP employees who are department heads who would be entitled to it. Is that correct? And the rest are not SAP. The rest of the department heads are not SAP employees.
No, the town accountant is an SAP employee.
Oh, that's right. Because she's considered a department head and she's now off contract.
And the
Okay.
the conservation.
In the building commissioner,
Okay. Building Commissioner,
youth and family director.
Youth and Family. So we're up to about at least a half a dozen. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that we had that the invited participants, the folks who are covered, there are a fair number of SA, since it's not employees generally. Any other questions from the board before we make a decision?
My only other question, going back to what I had questioned here on employee development, that leaves us with $315 in the account. Do we anticipate any other requests from anybody for tuition or school reimbursements?
We do not before June 30th of this year.
Okay, that's what I needed.
Nobody applied? Nobody's applied. We handle tuition reimbursement requests. We set a deadline of, what was that, January?
Mm-hmm.
I believe so.
And I don't think we had any application. My memory isn't what it used to be. Vanessa, do you recall? I don't think we had any applications this year.
I don't think we did.
Yeah, because I think I reported, and I can double check this. I think if anyone else remembers, I reported to the board on whether or not we had any requests. I think the only one we received was Mr. Donovan's. There was an issue. He got notice of his eligibility a little bit after the deadline. You may recall, we had to decide whether to open it up, and we gave him some money, but we have no pending tuition reimbursement requests.
Right.
If you'd be more comfortable funding it, we could split it up between employee development, it's just paperwork, and in management consulting. Again, we have 9,500 in management consulting. The only thing I anticipate being drawn on for that is legal fees. And I've
Right.
never seen a legal bill from a town council, so I have no idea
Well,
what that bill will be. And I had also offered up at the time we had asked Mr. Norris, we asked him to do 2 things. His analysis of the employee benefits under Section 11 and the MEPA study. I had volunteered to Mr. Purple that if there was not money for legal fees, I thought the Section 11 review, it would be appropriate for this board to fund that at least in whole or in part. So, and I don't know if there's any precedent for that, Mark. It seemed to me in this case that the Section 11 review was a very specific thing we were asking, and it related to the work of the board. So it would be appropriate for the board to fund it.
Yeah, there is no precedent, but we're happy to take donations.
Okay.
And in all honesty, I joke somewhat, but we're usually well within budget in non-bargaining years. FY22 is going to be a collective bargaining. That's when the contracts are renegotiated. So that's usually when that line item gets used pretty heavily. So
Okay. So in terms of, and I think I've said this before, in terms of paying Mr. Norris for the MEPA study, that is part of our quadrennial review budget, which is FY21. So we've got to pay him now. He has to bill us by the end of June. So we
Yes.
will not be getting into FY22 with him. I have no idea what his bill will look like for any of this work. So that's why I'm hedging, Dave.
Okay,
I'm taking the full 2,000.
well, I'd take it out of employee development then.
All right. Yeah, we're past the deadline for employee
Right.
development.
Yep.
My understanding is also we're a little bit loose. If someone were to come to us with something extraordinary at the last minute, I think we could look at 53020, mindful of this. But I don't mind if you want to take 1,000, you want to take 1,000 out of employee development and 1,000 out of management consultant.
Whatever the board decides, it's fine.
Yeah. Vanessa, is that make a problem for you guys? Because it's really
No.
both. It's
Yeah,
really kind of both.
We would just craft the payable sheet to split it 50% between both line items.
Yeah, and that would leave a little something left in employee development. Either way, I'm good with it. I don't want to take it all out of management consulting because I think it is employee development, but
Okay.
it is also consulting. So I can be very Solomonic. We can split the bit. Do I have a sense of the board to support this at the requested level of $2,000? Is that what I'm hearing? All right.
Yes.
A shake of heads. All right. So the chair, I can make a motion, or Dave, do you want to make the motion?
Fine. I move that we take 1,000 out of category 53070 and 1,000 out of 53020.
All right, to fund the request as presented in the packet at 46 for the DEI training.
Right.
And we will be, on the plaque, we will be co-sponsors with the Board of Selectmen. Sounds good. Second for the motion?
Second,
All right, this will be a roll call vote. Mr. Dietz.
I will vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. Mr. Nixon.
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein.
yes,
And the chair votes in the affirmative. And thank you to Ms. Hale for taking the lead on finding this training. And is there room, if it's by Zoom, can I sit in?
Let me check.
Can I audit the
Our
course
presenter?
for $2,000? Am I allowed? I don't want to
Yes,
take
I-
up the seat of a manager. I want to make that clear.
Right. I just want to clarify that with her. I would hope that would not be a problem. So I'll let
Yep.
you know that. Before.
Yep, I would love to audit it on behalf of the personnel board. If you could frame it
Certainly.
as something we like to do. I did the same thing with the last training with Mr. Way. I'm not a paid participant, but whereas we are responsible for these areas, that would be terrific. Thank you very
Certainly.
much. All right. Lastly, other business. Something came to my attention this morning. Ms. Hale reminded me we had talked, Mr. Rubenstein had received feedback that some department heads would like to see the self-evaluation form brought back into the performance review process. And this was something Ms. Hale said she had a template and could provide, and she provided it to me this morning. So it didn't make it onto our agenda. We discussed this at the last meeting. Thank you, Ms. Hale, for bringing, she had 2 templates to my attention. I think this is worthy of discussion, but I don't want to try to add something to the review process for this current process. The timeline has department heads working on it now. We didn't bring this into our meeting in time for me to put the form in front of you, and we're a third of the way into May. So I think this is something the board should look at in June, and then we can discuss what kind of self-evaluation template we would like to approve, and it would become part of the process next year. Does that make sense? Does somebody want to have a special meeting and try to get this into the process now?
No.
I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. We've got, May is review month, and to still be discussing pieces of the review process, I think might be a little confusing. So
I
I think
agree.
Thank you. So the feedback that Mr. Rubenstein brought back to us this year we will discuss and make part of the process for next year. So Ms. Hale, if you could send out, you already sent me the template. You don't need to do anything. I will include it in the packet for our June meeting. And that brings us to calendar. We have scheduled a meeting for June, if everybody has their calendar. We've scheduled a meeting for June 9th at noon. We will discuss reviews. Did we want to go ahead and just set up a time, just in case there are any issues with reviews before the end of the fiscal year or anything comes up? Schedule a meeting provisionally, which can be canceled, for Wednesday, June 23rd. Does that work for everyone? I just feel better if we had some glitch should come up. There's a lot of reviews coming in. If for any reason we don't have a quorum, we've worked hard to set up a timeline that gets these reviews done in June. Ms. Jasinski had very strong feelings that raises should begin at the beginning of the fiscal year. Does anybody have a problem scheduling something which we can then cancel for Wednesday, June 23rd?
No, no problem.
Okay,
No.
great. Vanessa, does that work for you? Wednesday, June 23rd at noon?
It does.
And can you pass it on to Mr. Davis for the Zoom
I
room
will.
reservation? Great. And we'll have it. And if we conclude our business on June 9th, we can go ahead and cancel.
I just wanted to let the board know that we're in the midst of setting up all the new folders for this year's reviews. So then I'll send you that link to the OneDrive folder where you can look at last year's reviews and all new reviews submitted for the June meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Hale. And if anybody would like a copy of the tracking spreadsheet, just the list of the SAP employees, so you can keep track of which ones you've read and which ones you haven't, shoot me an email and I'll send you the tracking sheet. Everybody has their own way of keeping track of their information. So I don't want to clog your inbox with things you don't need. I sent you enough things in the packet as it is. All right. Ms. Hale, do you need us to book July at this time? It might not be a bad idea to look at calendars
Sure.
for July. We have a holiday on the 4th. So I think a lot of the work that goes into putting the packet together, we should be past the holiday. I'm looking at the second Wednesday in July. It's the 14th. That means Vanessa and I would be meeting after Independence Day, and I would be filing a packet on the 9th. That works for me. So a meeting on the 14th works for me if that works for everyone else. Is that good? July 14th? All right, July 14th at noontime. Jay, does this 11 o'clock slot work better for you? I know you're always running up against a meeting.
No
Okay.
time really works well.
All right.
I support 5 different biotech companies, so I'm getting hit in every direction at all times of the day.
All right.
So,
Well, we're lucky to have you. All right. So the board is scheduled July 14th at 12 p.m. And Vanessa, as always, we rely upon you to get that set up with Mr. Davis, and thanks
Yes.
very much. All right. Do we have anything from anybody else?
Mhm.
Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right. So while we are still recording, I am gaveling us out. We'll see you again here on June 9th. We are gaveled out at 12